So, hello and welcome. My name is Steve Pugh, and I do something called the Growth Strategy Podcast. We broadcast on LinkedIn Live, Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. We do TikTok as well now sometimes, on lots of different platforms. And what we try and do is basically introduce you to different people that I think can hopefully help your business or career. They can share some insight on some different kind of topics. And basically that's what we kind of do each week. We mix this up between kind of podcasts where I interview a guest and live streams and different stuff. And basically if you check out Roadmap MBA, we're there as a startup to help bring free business education to the world. But a big part of that is the learning and development and personal development space. And almost it's a career path that we all go on. Nobody is ever finished. But the best way for me to do that is to learn from really interesting people that have different insight and opinions and viewpoints to what you do. That actually, that's the whole point of bringing in Andrew today as one of our many guests on the channel. And then all of these also get clipped up and go on to Spotify, Google Play Store, Apple iTunes, all of the other kind of podcast kind of stuff today as well. So if you watch this, if you catch it live, or even if you don't, if you comment, it should pop up on one of my screens. I'll happily bring the question in if it's appropriate. And yeah, so we'll kick off. So Andrew, there we go. Everyone can see you and hear you.
Hi, thanks very much for asking me on the show today, Steve.
No, honestly, no worries. And I'm glad you could make it. How's your Thursday been generally?
Yeah, it's been awesome. Doing too many things at the moment, and I have got a kill list at the moment that I'm working through.
What's a kill list? Just like a target list?
Yeah, it's just basically, if you imagine yourself as an enterprise,
yes,
and you're that fearsome CEO who just decides they have to take radical action because they've got too much to do, then you just start killing projects, don't you? And that's that's why I've got to kill this now. I've got to kill that. It's good because I think for me, entrepreneurship is a bit of a flow state that you start doing more stuff and being more creative and putting more stuff on the board, but then you have to kill some of that because that's the only way you can operate. Yeah.
And I've gone through something similar I mentioned it on my live stream on Friday, but it's almost one of the big things that we wanted to do, because most startups have big ambitions or businesses have big ambitions. And it was to look at the whole, there's a thing called Y Combinator. It's one of the world's biggest startup accelerators. And what I'd started to do was put the things in place from last October to start to ramp up as if we'd got this big investment, so that if we did get the big cash investment from America, we could just skyrocket. And it was, I was never 100% sure. And actually now I know it's probably not the right thing for us to do as a business. But the point is I'd put in place a lot of things that now I know weren't fit for purpose. So again, we've gone through, like literally in the past few weeks, the exact same thing to actually say, look, I don't need that anymore. I need to change that. And I think what's been quite interesting is that, so I did a thing the other day. It was to do with the 5 biggest mistakes I've made this year. And it's funny because one of the things that you often see on social media, not everyone, a lot of people pretend they're perfect at everything and everything always works great. And I think the humility to actually say, look, I got that completely wrong. I did YouTube wrong for years. The content that I was creating just wasn't what people search for. But I know that now. But I prefer to talk about it in a way that it might help someone else. And so exactly what you're saying is that it's great to hear that, because often, especially if you work for yourself or you work in a small team, or even if you work in a big team, you often don't know what other people are up to. And a lot of people worry, is it just me? Should I feel bad that I'm ditching that project that I wanted to do? And for me, at least, the answer is no. It shows growth that you're not just doing the same thing you always have. So no, I applaud your honesty as well. It's cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's the one, in a way, that's what focuses your mission and your trajectory. The more kind of things that you not crash into, but the more experiments you make, the more it sharpens the path that you must follow. And I think that only happens by doing stuff. I think it's kind of unavoidable, unless you're one of these lucky people who wakes up and just does this one like Facebook type thing. You're that rare person. Most of us don't experience business growth like that. I think that's rare. Maybe some people do. My brother, for example, is a plumber, an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. But that business he inherited from my father. So it's not that he never has to do anything creative and try anything new.
I get you.
But I suppose he's in a slightly less creative entrepreneurial space in some ways. So yeah, it's not all the same, but I think some experimentation is very helpful.
Well, I must admit, so I watch a lot of YouTube. And there's a guy that I discovered recently. So one of the things that I quite enjoy is that it's when it's like the New York $1 million listing to see these like mega mansions, or the, what do they call it, Billionaires Row in New York, where so it's these like super real estate people that have show off these £200 million apartments. And there's a guy who does it called Ryan Serhart, and I quite like him. He's just someone that, you know, sometimes you just scroll and it just comes across something. And then because I clicked on it once, YouTube shows me more of his stuff. And it was an interview with him and just a podcast host, as you know you do, and he was talking through his story. And he's set up, and the way that he portrays himself is this: how I made multi-million dollars and got all this profile and stuff. But the truth is, he originally wanted to be an actor. And he went to New York to be an actor, and he tried out for all these things. And he got on I think it was a sitcom years ago. That failed, and he became a real estate agent off the back of it. And basically, he couldn't make it work. He struggled to make any money. He said it was $9,000 in his first year, etc. And he just couldn't make this business fail because it's really tough in business. And then fast forward like a year or two, there was a TV show that wanted to make a TV show about like $1 million listings, and they wanted real estate agents to go on and, you know, present on this TV show, which goes out to 25 million people. And basically he auditioned for it, and he played a character of what he thought they wanted. He wasn't that person. He wasn't a very good real estate agent, but because of his acting background, he went for it. But then he's on TV in front of 25 million people for 10 years and gets all these little side spin-off gigs and stuff. And now he's set up his own company to do it bigger. And my point was, yeah, but mate, the break was the TV show and 10 years of profile, probably for free, if not getting paid for it, in front of 25 million people. That's given you the platform that now, yes, you're a multi-millionaire because you've got this platform to like utilize. But for regular people, my point is that his advice on how to magically become worth tens of millions of pounds isn't as valid, because he got famous from a TV show that then, it's like the Kardashians, you know, yes, they've done well to monetize, especially the mum, to figure out what they had and do the best they could with it. But without the TV show and everything, it's hard to build the brands. But for regular people, unless you get that break, you get lucky. The other example I always give is Joe Wicks. So Joe Wicks here in the UK is a fitness guy. And there are probably 10,000 fitness people in the UK that do stuff. He was in the right place, the right time, got loads of TV stuff and whatever. And now he sells books and all this stuff. But it was largely luck that he was in the right place at the right time that catapulted him to where he is now. But it's hard for someone to, you can't replicate that. It's just luck. Does that make sense? And then it's almost when people often do talks, is that I think people need to be honest about their journey. You can still create your own luck to put yourself in that position as much as you can. But it's hard, and you need to learn and pivot and change and pivot. And it's just because so much of the internet now is people just telling people how good they are. They often forget to be honest about, yeah, but it was really crappy for 10 years. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it is. And I think that is the brutal reality for most entrepreneurs in the early days, that it's not going to be easy. I mean, if you look at Warren Buffett, right, it took him a long time to make his first million.
James Dyson, for 20 years, and I've met James Dyson, 20 years struggling away in a spare room with motors and bags and trying to make this vacuum work. And then he eventually did it. J.K. Rowling again. But again, I think it's, you know, you get the 20-year-olds that picture themselves in front of a Lamborghini and like, oh, you can get rich quick on my day trading scheme. And you're like, come on, is anyone going to fall for that? But I guess they do. But it's just, I think it's because of all of the noise, it's difficult for the genuinely good people to stand out who are trying to do it properly. Does that make sense? And that's why I think it's really interesting. Would you be happy to give a quick intro about who you are, where you're from, for people that might not know you so far?
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's kind of a good setup in a way. So there's a line from Shakespeare which says, you know, some people strive for greatness, some people are born into greatness, and some people have greatness thrust upon them, which is what you're kind of talking about, the reality TV star. And I'd say I'm someone who's striving for greatness. I'm still in the striving position in life. I come from Walthamstow in East London. My dad was a plumber. My mum was in catering, although she became more of an entrepreneur later in life. So she's kind of a role model in that way for me.
That's cool.
but I was in the film industry for a long time. I started out in the film industry painting backdrops and making tea, and then just through hard work and perseverance. So this is recurring theme here for the show. I eventually got a break, and actually that break came about from finding an old Silicon Graphics computer, which is this old computer they would have made Jurassic Park on or something like that on it, and finding it dusty in the corner of the office, picking it up, turning it on. I think it was being used to keep a door open, actually, and teaching myself 3D graphics. And from that, people were like, "Oh, this guy's got value above just making tea." And from there, I'll fast forward a bit here. I became an expert in planning trick photography in films and commercials, and
cool.
leading teams to execute really complex sequences on feature films and commercials. I went all around the world doing that, and it was great fun, and worked with some really cool, inspiring people. And yeah, it was really great. But I reached a point then in my 30s where by this point I was a co-founder of a post-production company in London, but I'd reached a point where I was kind of tired from the really crazy long hours, which was super unpredictable, thinking ahead to wanting to have a family and to have a more regular lifestyle. And at that point, I was starting to think about how I can step away and just have a more regular life and see more of my friends and family, which is a struggle when you're in the film industry. I think it's probably got the highest rate of divorce in like, it's certainly up there in terms of people struggling with their relationships because they just don't work so much, and that's not something I wanted. So then I decided, actually what happened was I got basically the business I was a minority co-founder of got shut down. I got my redundancy notice through the door, and then like push came to shove, I was like, do you know what? I want to seize the day. I want to start my own business and be in control of my future for all kinds of reasons. For knowing what's really going on in the business, which you don't always know if you're a minority in a minority ownership position, and also have more control over my lifestyle as well.
No, I respect that. And part of the reason why I set up on my own is that I guess like, so the corporate career, but almost in different jobs that I had working for other people, 3 times in a row, I kind of got screwed over. And what was quite funny is that there was a point where I could have gone into a 4th and gone to work for someone else again. And there was a genuine worry because when you've been burned, burn me, fool me once, fool me, but fool me twice, that kind of thing. And it was just, I just didn't want to do it again. And it was that balance where I completely agree with you, is that there's a freedom, but also a massive, really scary bit that when you do look after your own destiny, that there's no one there to help you or save you or look after you. But then if you achieve it, it's you did it. But then if it also fails, it's the freedom of being able to do that. I respect that because that happened to me as well. And I think a lot of other people will, there's talk of a potential recession coming up. And I think there's a lot of people now that will either want to start a business or might find, I spoke to someone this morning and there's a potential that 2 of their family members could be getting made redundant. And the point is that there'll be lots and lots of people are going through this exact same process that actually will take inspiration that, oh, well, if that's what Andrew did and, how did he feel at the time? And actually that was shit, but I feel like that now, so maybe I could do it as well. I think it's that almost the role model type. I think it's important to share those journeys because I've been made redundant twice and it's horrible. It's a horrible process, but actually, generally things seem to turn out okay. But when you're actually in it, it can be soul destroying. So I appreciate you kind of sharing your journey.
Yeah. It's quite one of the funny things for me now is because I've developed vertigo over the last few years, which is, it's not terribly incapacitating. I just have to manage it slightly, like not turn around too fast. But my job involved a lot of movement in the film industry and that I was in before. So actually that bridge is kind of burnt for me anyway.
Okay.
So it's about, like, for me, it's just I can only focus on the forward. There is no back, which I think would probably be even scarier for a lot of people, but I've kind of just got used to that situation now. That's my bread and butter now.
No, I respect that. So one of the things I always like to do is to dig into people's backstory a little bit, because there are, I do believe that there's common traits between people that are entrepreneurial and try their own thing and do. So what were you like at school?
This has really got me thinking, actually, this part. And do you know, we're going to talk about my book later.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that I remembered is my first head teacher at primary school was this guy called Chris Paling, and he wrote a book called The Hungry Book Monster. And it's quite funny that my book has actually got monster in the title now. And I don't know if that's just some kind of long-term ripple effect coming through the universe, because he was a very inspiring person. So at school, I was creative, but I wasn't very confident. And certainly as I grew older and went into senior school, I was very withdrawn, probably, and I didn't handle senior school that well. I swapped schools just before I started senior school, so my social group wasn't quite the same. And then when I went into senior school, it was quite a challenge socially, with just those different challenges of people growing up and things like fashion and peer groups, and kind of, not bullying might be a bit strong in some situations, but certainly more aggressive approaches to relationship building within senior school, right? So that was definitely a challenge. I think the other thing that I got from senior school was this idea of people being put into groups and having their talent judged very early on. You go to in my senior school, we went there when you were 11, 12, and then they go, oh, you're not very good at maths. You're in the bottom set. Were you and all the rest of the dummies, right? That's how they did it for maths, English, and whatever. And so that was me in the bottom set of maths for the whole of school, but I still got a B for GCSE, even though I had kids in my class who were really disruptive and so on. And that's, they had their own challenges. But what I take away from that is that people are much more capable than we realize, and judging and labeling people too quickly really diminishes the opportunity for them, and also the opportunity for other people who are connected to them as well.
I completely agree. That it's the whole point of how, for a lot of people, it's almost like your whole life is mapped out when you're 14. So that if you're getting really good grades at 14, they put you in better sets, you get better GCSEs, because then you get better A levels, you got in different classes, you get better university, better. And it's just, I agree with you that likewise a lot. So I feel I developed late. So although I did quite well at school, I feel I didn't become a proper person. Sorry, my voice is quite cracky today. And like to the point where I think I developed almost after university, that's when I really accelerated as well. Like, I think you get some people that grow up earlier, and the point is, I don't think that your career path should be dictated from, well, at any age you can kind of pivot and change. But I think it is a common problem that people, because it's also the self-esteem that if you are a child and someone puts you in bottom set for everything, you might then think, well, am I worthless? Am I crap? Are my life prospects to be insert job here? You know what I mean? As where actually it's that whole aspirational thing of where some teachers probably without thinking just go, you there. But that can, make huge differences in people's lives.
Yeah, it's a broad brushstroke that completely can shape people's futures. And I think I've written about this in my book, about how the power of expectation can shape reality, because if we expect people to perform at a certain level, then we'll put resources and effort in that match that expectation. And then guess what? If we don't support people very well, they don't perform as well. And then we go, oh, we were right. They weren't very good after all, and they matched my expectations. So the only way you can actually break out of that, I think, is you have to raise your expectations and give people more opportunities. There are some exceptions to that rule. For example, there's a basketball player who's just been drafted to the NBA. This French kid who's
Wembanyama. Yeah, he's 7'5".
He's so tall, right? So obviously he is obviously skillful, and it's not just genetic, but there is a genetic part to that is helping him there. So yeah, we're not all necessarily born all with the same physiques and inbuilt capabilities, but on the whole, we're much closer together in our capabilities than people probably like to talk about.
I
And
agree.
people probably don't like to talk about that or admit that, because then that opens ourselves up to insecurity and realizing that we're not so special. So if I end up being like the managing director of some company, it might be actually the guy who's working in the warehouse is actually, given all the opportunities you've had in life, could have been doing the same thing as you. And I think that's the reality for 99.9% of us. We're all much more capable than we realize, and often what other people realize as well.
No, cool. I completely agree. So talk me through your kind of career. How did you, I guess, get into the film industry, and how did that progress?
So yeah, the film industry involved me dropping lots of CVs around Soho.
Gotcha. Can you
And
tell me about that? Because it's that there will be people around the world that want to get into film and TV, and
yeah.
they might send one email once, not get
Mhm.
it, and give up. And that's why actually, yeah. What's the story? Tell me the backstory. I love the.
So I went round Soho for about 3 or 4 days, just dropping CVs in different offices, just through the letterbox and knocking on doors. And then eventually I got a call back from one place which doesn't exist anymore, a place called The House. And they took me on as a runner there, making tea, toast, and and I did that for a while, and it was fine. But I think one of the things that I didn't develop very well from school, and I think this is a key skill that I'll just point out now as it's relevant, is I think being able to build relationships with other people, and network and strategic relationships is good. You should have people as friends as well.
Mhm.
Things should be based around genuine connection, but strategic relationships with other people, being out, having those skills can really help you. And I think when I was in that post-production place, I wasn't that great at building those
Got you.
friendships. I didn't realize how important they were. I focused too much on the technical
Mhm.
skills and not enough on the relationship skills. So I did that. Fortunately, with some people I did get on well with. They recommended me to some guys who ran this trick photography unit down at Shepperton Studios. And so I then moved from being a runner in Soho to being a runner at Shepperton Studios, which was making tea, painting backdrops, and like this, loading some cameras, this kind of thing. I had to do that for like a couple of years. It was really hard because I commuted for like 4 hours a day.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, so to do it, so some days I'd be getting out of bed at 4:30, getting the first tube, going all the way across London, like work with the crew all day, and then they would finish at like 8 or 9. Then I would paint a backdrop, go, catch the last train home, go to sleep
Wow.
4 or 5 hours, and then go around again. So
What was it that
that's what
you
it took.
want? Why did you want to work in that industry? Just out of interest, because that's a hell of a commitment.
My original love was photography. I got into photography, probably as a way to just try and express myself originally when I was a young person. But I've always loved photography, and I
Same.
still do.
Mm.
And I studied actually, when I was 16. I went to the Brit School in South
Wow.
London,
That's cool.
and they had a film and TV and video course. So I did that. So we spent some time on cameras and so on. And I always loved photography and lighting. So my idea was to get into cinematography, which never ended up happening because I was in this trick photography unit, which is slightly different. And that opportunity just never progressed. But I just, I adapted and I went this other way, which was actually planning these shots, which is actually really cool.
Can I
Anyway,
ask, just because as someone that is interested in photography, what is trick photography?
it's actually what I call motion control photography, but it's not only motion control photography. So it's just making something look like it's happening in camera that's not actually happening.
Okay. Got you.
And then combining that with 3D elements and so on
No, cool.
afterwards in post production and compositing layers. So and so often with that, I'd be sat down with a director, maybe a big director or maybe just a commercial director, and we we design the look of a shot. Then I'd work out, how we can film the different bits of it, and then go and execute the filming of it. Sometimes the director would be there when we were filming it. Other times I'd be leading a team to film it.
That's cool. Any particular projects that you're proud of that you've kind of worked on?
Oh, there's some good ones. I was involved in a project for Philips that won a Cannes Grand Prix for Best
Wow.
Commercial, which was
Wow.
for a shot called Philips Carousel. You can find that on YouTube, which was like this never-ending cinematic shot of clowns robbing a bank. It looked like something from The Dark Knight. Really cool. So that was crazy because I had to design that when we were there in about a day and a half, and they'd not really prepared it very well. So yeah, had to design that really quickly.
Wow.
and get that ready to shoot. And things like Harry Potter, Moulin Rouge. Moulin Rouge was a great experience in Australia. I went to shoot there as a young man.
As in
Worked
the
with Baz
actual
Luhrmann.
film?
Yeah, and
Wow.
got to work with Baz Luhrmann. That was cool. Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, lots of projects. Yeah.
So what happened next?
So then, I took a break and went to university for a while. And like, because I was employed by this company, I don't know how much to go into this because I'm not trying. I'm not trying to point fingers or anything. Anyway, it just turned out this company did. I was there for a number of years. I said to them, I want a certain wage now, like equivalent to a graduate.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't a graduate. I wanted the same as a graduate because I'd done my time.
Okay.
And they were like, no. And I was doing really responsible work. And I thought, do you know what? I'm going to go and do a degree. I'm going to go and do a degree now and get myself some options. And I went and did a photography degree for a few years, which was good. That did elevate my thinking and open up my viewpoint. Definitely the education was good for me. And then after that I came back into the film industry because it was just, I suppose it was easy at the time. And I still enjoyed filmmaking at that point. I still enjoyed being, and I still do enjoy filmmaking. It's just the hours and the craziness around it, which is not so great. So I did filmmaking, and then I was asked to become a co-founder of this post-production place. And we did that for a number of years, for about 5-6 years. But it was a struggling business the whole time. We did it because we got the business model wrong. The business model was not right.
Just because it might help people, what did you find was wrong and how did you look to rectify it? And the reason I mention this is because part of the challenge that a lot of people don't think of is that they launch a business, and it could be, you can pick any business in the world, and they can sell as much and as hard as they want, but something's not quite clicking. What was it that made you realize that the business model wasn't quite what it needed to be? Does that make sense?
I think my greatest clarity on it comes at a distance after a number of years. I think it's hard sometimes when you're in the middle of something, when you're in the train and it's on fire. It's kind of hard to have the clarity. You're always just trying to survive from month to month. And I bear responsibility as much as anyone else for that. Looking back, what I can tell you is our niching was wrong.
Okay.
We were too generic, and we were the budgets that we were going after weren't big enough for the quality of work we were delivering. So there was a product market mismatch, but then our overheads were horrendous as well. So we had horrific central London rent overheads on a quite a decent sized office. And I think those combination of things killed us. And I think the thing about post-production anyway is it's not a high return business for the businesses involved. It's no that they don't make a fortune. Maybe a few do, like ILM, but a huge number of them struggle because they're always being promised. You go and do a feature film, they'll say, you'll get hit really hard by the studio executives pushing you down on the price that you do something for. And people will just be so desperate to keep the doors open on the business and keep people employed that they'll take a bad deal. And that happens over and over again. And they'll just go around the whole of London or LA or whatever, offering these not so great deals, and people will take them. And it's a hard business from that point of view. And things like overages can really hurt you. Like, let's say you've agreed to do a shot a certain way and you've delivered it all, and then the director wants to change something. Well, the studio might not want to pay for that change, and they might just want to pass it on to you, in which case all of a sudden you've got to pay for another 2 weeks of labor and resources and so on. So it's a high risk, low return business. So there's many reasons why we have many things that were going against us. I think if we'd started the business 10 years earlier, it might have been more successful. I think the timing was poor as well.
But that's just really interesting because a lot of my background is offshore energy stuff, and you see the same thing. So you have the major corporations, the oil and gas companies, that they go around and they go out and get a price, and then they hammer everyone down on the price, and then they say, okay, well, we want to pay you on 120-day payment terms. And then if you don't deliver, they're going to move. And it's just, it feels like in lots of different industries, people abuse their power in some ways to get a better rate for themselves. But my point is, it's not just one industry. I'd see it in a lot of different industries. I was once, I'm in the northeast of England, and we have a lot of car factories here. So we have Nissan in Sunderland. And I know the company that makes the seats for the Nissan. And what was interesting is that in theory, on revenue terms, it was like a £50 million a year contract. But the issue was the margins were crap anyway. But every single time they would push you down on, like, yeah, but can we get the thread cheaper on the seat? Can the foam cheaper on the seat? The springs, and you've got someone just cranking a screw on you all the time. Because if you have a factory that makes car seats located next to Nissan to feed Nissan, that it's hard to change away to someone else because they want you on. For me, it's an ethical mindset about business. Is actually, do you want to be the guy that keeps screwing over other people to make that extra 4p saving per seat? But that could put a whole company out of business. So it's really interesting for me to hear that happens in film and TV because I know nothing about the industry, but I see it in other places. So fast forward then to, would you like to tell people about what you do now?
Yeah, sure. So it's been a journey to get where I am now. So maybe, like, if it's helpful for people, I could explain a bit of a process to get where I am now as well.
Yeah.
I don't know how much time we've got. I don't want to.
I'm cool. I've got my clock, but honestly, don't worry about it. Just
okay.
Go for it.
All right. So yeah, I like knowing filmmaking and storytelling. I thought, hey, for my first company, I'm going to do video production, right? And I had an idea of making high quality videos at a good, profitable price for business owners. I saw that there was an opportunity with technology being more accessible, like high quality digital cameras and so on, to bring really good videos to people that also had a business impact for people. So that's how I started off. But one of the things that you need to understand in business is that you might have a good idea, but other people might not be able to see it as well. So it doesn't, like, it's about the story you tell, not just the product you sell. And I think that is hugely important. It's, you can have the best product in the world, but if people can't perceive it that way, then it's not going to change anything. And to cut to the chase on this particular phase of my business growth, it was very hard because I didn't have recurring revenue. So I was famine or feast. Right. So, yeah, you might get a good video project and then I'd be out trying to get another one and so on. And then even when people paid you well, because I was still quite green when it came to contracts and so on, they'd always been trying to get more and more value from the situation, and you like struggle to put a line under the project and say it's done now. And actually what I would do now, if I was setting up a video company now, is I'd actually do a subscription service for the videos, because I think that would be a great way to do it. Get an lump fee from the customer and then rent them the videos. If you believe that your videos actually have a strategic impact for the business, and some of the videos I have did, right? They were designed that way, that they help people close more deals, like very big deals. So that, you know, my hypothesis is that those people would now still be paying me monthly very happily for those videos if I'd set it up that way. So yeah, I think so. Like it's good to think about different ways of charging for things, because that way you can be better off long term from doing it. So
well, I think it's the software as a service idea for other stuff. I think it's a really good. What's quite funny is that, so I was born and raised in Liverpool, and one of the things that you're very good at when you grow up there is learning how to blag stuff. And it'll be the same in East London and certain places where, but I almost see it as a superpower, that the more you can then figure out the workarounds, you can try from a business point of view to kind of figure out where people could abuse it. So as a prime example, I would worry that people might just download, save it, stop paying you the monthly fee, but keep using it. Does that make sense?
Sure.
I'm sure they would. I'm sure there's ways around it, but it's almost. But I think I love the fact that you're at least trying to think about how to do things differently, as where a lot of people don't. They just do the same as what they've always done, which actually, you know, doesn't always work.
You're just going to get the same results if you do that. I mean, like I don't do that now, but at some point down the like right now, I have a limited scope for what I can focus on. But if down the line I wanted to relaunch another video production company without me being hands-on, that's exactly how I set it up. So if you've got one, consider it. I think it'd be a really good idea. From there, I was like, oh, part of the problem there, and this is part of the problem with the film industry as well that we had, is that we weren't direct to client.
Okay.
So in the film industry, when we were brought into a project with our post-production business, is we would be brought in by a production company. So in fact, let me draw a whole food chain out for you. So let's say we've got a soup company that makes soup. Then they've got their marketing department, and they've got an agency that they hire, and they give that agency, I don't know, £10 million a year contract or whatever for running their advertising and newspapers and everything they're going to do. But then that advertising company goes, oh, we're going to do a campaign for Christmas, a commercial for Christmas. We're going to hire a production company. And then the production company goes, we're going to hire crew and everyone to shoot it, and then a post-production company to put it together. So you start with a big pot of money and a lot of control and influence. But as you get further along, the control and influence and money diminishes, and you're left often on the post-production end doing all the work and having a small amount of the budget. And so this is partly what I was experiencing in a way also with a video production company, because I was still at the bottom of the food chain, so to speak. So part of my thinking then was like, I want to be nearer the source, right? How can be nearer the source? By pivoting into being a marketing agency and having the relationship direct with the client.
No, that makes sense. Yeah.
So that's what I did, and it did work well, and the business was growing. We're doing websites and some social stuff for people, and it was going well. And we had recurring revenue as well, so that was a box ticked from a challenge with the business of the famine and feast. But then two challenges came along at that point. One of them was COVID. So I had my three. Yeah, well, one of them was triggered by one of them was COVID, and that triggered two challenges, which was a lot of my clients killed their budgets overnight, and a load of my other clients got killed by Brexit. That they just couldn't export anymore because they just couldn't do it with the volume that they were doing. So I lost a huge amount of my client base around the same time, and my son was suddenly home from school. So it became a very challenging time to keep the business going. And that was a very negative moment for me as a business person. Have to admit, like
I
that
can
that
imagine.
moment when you're like, I'm losing my businesses. I'm losing like these people, this thing I've worked really hard for. My son's here. I need to take care of him and look after him. But then I don't have the time or energy to go and find new business.
Yeah, it's tough.
You
Yeah.
know, you're in the middle of like an absolute megastorm, really. Um, but something else was happening as well in the background, and that was that I was realizing as an agency owner that people were completely dependent on me to solve their problem. But actually, what I realized is a lot of the time people weren't getting a result, and it's not because we weren't delivering as the agency
Hmm.
with me and the small team I had. It's because people weren't following through from that other end. It's like, you know, we can build you a nice website and make sure you get leads, but if you're not and we can build like a sales automation system, but if you're not going to use these things
Hmm.
and you're not going to be accountable yourself as the end client for doing them, then you won't get the result. And so what I realized, part of the problem that I'd created from being an agency owner and having an agency was a problem of dependency. That people are looking at us just to be the solution, their
Hmm.
savior, their hero, for us to be the protagonist to solve everything, and for them to just sit there and get a result. And that's just not reality. I
Yeah.
think most of the time there's some input required from the client, whatever business you're in. And so at this point, I was like, do you know what? I really need to start coaching people and helping them be accountable for taking action and committing to a course of action as well, because this is another problem, a lot of flip-flopping of
Hmm.
people. But one week they want to do this, next week they want to do that, and that's hard as well. So I started to realize that a lot of the chat, you know, a process of that you go through as an entrepreneur is finding layers of challenges. Like you peel back one layer, then you find another layer of challenges, and this is kind of the journey that I've gone on. And then you'll start realizing, well, actually, the reason people don't win, the reason we weren't winning, for example, is the post-production company, it was because we had the wrong model, right? And
Hmm.
we were poorly niched. And it was because we didn't have strong enough sales and marketing. But ultimately, underneath it all, it's because we didn't have strong enough mindsets and strong enough growth mindsets and how to learn and pivot and adjust quickly enough and commit to it and build relationships and go and we did, like it was our personal and team performance which ultimately dragged down the business.
Hmm.
And I just see that all the time now with businesses. I actually see it day to day when I'm do have email correspondence with people at huge corporations and at smaller businesses. This low level of performance with just the basic things like returning emails or attending meetings, just things like this. And you realize ultimately, if people can't perform well at these small things,
Hmm.
that doesn't end there. That ripples out to the big things as well. And so that's why I then wanted to get into coaching and help influence and change people's minds, because ultimately this is what it's about for me. It's about helping businesses survive and flourish. I don't want people to get redundancy notices through their doors, because businesses help to support families and communities. And that's been one big underlying mission for me, is to help businesses sustain and keep sustaining and find a way to do that. And I realized ultimately coaching is a great way of doing that, and also of unlocking performance in all areas of people's life. If you can help people take ownership of their life and be
Hmm.
more accountable and have more of a growth mindset and communicate better with other people, that's not just something that stays inside the business. That's something that they take out into the world, into their families and their communities. And I realized that's the power that comes from being a coach, a speaker, and an author.
Okay. Can we talk about the book?
Yeah,
Because
sure.
we have a mutual friend, Michelle Reed. She'll probably watch this. Hi, Michelle. Um, for one, can you tell us what it is, and then we'll dig into a bit more about some of the subcontext and like what it's about, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I'll hold it up. It's called Monsters of Team Performance.
You have to go right a bit.
Right a bit. Okay,
There we
here we
go.
go.
There we go.
There we go.
Now we're good.
Okay, cool. So I as you know, I made this decision to go into coaching. I realized the dangers of being unniched, right? Just being a business coach, right? Just another business coach. I mean, when you're just another X, then you're putting yourself into a place where you can be easily pigeonholed and ignored and reduced and dismissed. That is the reality. And people still do that to me now, even though I do have a book, but not so much. That's just, this is the way it goes. So anyway, I wanted to specialize, and I also knew from my experience working with teams in the film industry and marketing and all these other companies I work with, that I realized there's an opportunity to improve teams and to think about things a bit differently. And a lot of these I think there's two different worlds, two different business worlds. There's like a bit of a black and white perspective, but go with me on this. So on the one hand, you've got the corporate world where people have training programs and 360 reviews, and everyone's used to everyone's more used to coaching and accountability and stuff like that. But then there's a whole other side of the business universe where that is just a complete stranger, where that just doesn't exist, where people, what do you mean accountability, mate? What are you talking about?
Well, things, 99.9% of businesses are SMEs. So SMEs is anyone under 50 million, but a huge percentage of those will be a few hundred K, if that. The point is, yeah, I completely agree.
So when I wrote Monsters of Team Performance, my idea was to connect with business owners and leaders who are complete strangers to the ideas of improving their mindsets, thinking about how things inside the mind and the way we think about things can be the things that actually drag down our business performance, and actually tell a story of how you as a business owner are trying to be successful. You've got your goals, the things that you're going after, and you think the reason that you're struggling is because your software is bad, or this is bad, or the campaign's not right. But ultimately, when you peel it all back, it's actually down to the team and the individual mindsets in the team. And that's what the book's about. And the book, I create the book in a very different way, even though it's quite thick. I'll hold this up. Sorry if you're just listening on audio, this won't make much sense to you, but I'll try and describe it so it makes a bit more sense to you. But it's not just a written book, it's a designed book.
Back a bit.
There we go. There we go. So it's not just a written book, it's a designed book as well. So you see like a lot of illustrations which make the key ideas really easy to grasp. And then to make it really gettable, I built the concepts, like these key challenges that teams and individuals suffer from, and around the monsters. So we have all these different.
Right. Keep going. There we go.
So we have all these different monsters that appear in a business. So, for example, the blame blob, right? So the blame blob appears in the business. Then people are more interested in blaming each other and running away from responsibility than working together, understanding what's gone wrong, and finding a better way forward. And even though these concepts are kind of fun and a bit silly, they're a really easy thing that people can really start to grasp and talk about. And I know from working in the film industry how prevalent blame is, and like it's a big thing in the film industry because
it's a big thing in all industries, to be honest.
Yeah. So it's everywhere. It's everywhere. Because people don't want to take responsibility, but that's it. But that's not, as I explain in the book, the things like the blame blob, they're not just driven by one thing. There can be a multitude of things that drive them. For example, if a company does a round of redundancies or announces, right now we've had today in the news, Royal Mail said they're going to be making, is it Royal Mail? BT definitely said they're going to be making some redundancies. And so that, if that's handled the wrong way, it could create a negative blame culture in the business, because people are going to be looking to push other people off the lifeboat rather than themselves.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the reality. So yeah, there could be multiple things that feed these things. So yeah, and the books, it's been really well received. So yeah, I'm really happy that it happened, and that I committed to that kind of creative and kind of crazy idea. I mean, who else would write a book called Monsters of Team Performance?
Out of interest, how did you find the process of actually writing the book? As in, so for instance, I know it's something that a lot of people are interested in, but from when you had the early idea all the way through to actually having it physically printed, published, as in, did you write a structure, then sit down every night for 4 hours and bash out a chapter, or how did you go through that process?
It took a long time, because my book is because my book is not just a written book, it's a visual book. It took a very long time. The process of writing it, I wrote about 200,000 words to get to the end result. So the end result was about 50,000 words. And it was a case of just writing, do more research, more writing. It actually started out as a slide deck.
Okay.
Right. The whole book started out as a slide deck, where I started doing coaching for teams, and I wanted to find a great visual way to start explaining these ideas really quickly and easily, these concepts, get them across to people. So I came up with this monsters concept. And then I was like, do you know what? I think this could be a book.
Okay.
And
cool.
from there, it was just a process of lots of writing and lots of research and doing all the illustrations. All the illustrations were done on my whiteboard behind me, and then photoshopped to make them what they are. And yeah, I think I would advise everyone else to start with just a simple written book, because it certainly made it a lot harder how graphical and everything of the book is.
Yeah, I've got you. No, quite. It's something I know a lot of people are interested in. So if you take, obviously, what's the dream? Where would you want to be in 5 years' time?
That's a great question. Okay, so I suppose I've got two role models right now, and it's kind of interesting comparing the English market to the USA market, in terms of who I want to be and where I want to go. The big daddy is Tony Robbins.
Okay, yeah.
And I suppose there's part of me that thinks I want to go that big.
But for instance, he has had 40, 50 years.
Oh yeah, I'm not going to. Yeah, sorry, I'm not necessarily talking about. I'm not talking about getting there and fight. I'm not necessarily talking. I'm extrapolating.
No, I love the ambition, but yeah. And who's the other one?
And John Gordon. He's a guy who's written a book called Positive Leadership, and he's written about 10 or 15 other books, and he's got quite a good tactic now of writing books with up and coming authors who I think are probably part of his coaching team. And so that's all, they're certainly in his world. I get that. I'm jumping to conclusions, but that's how it seems to me, that they're in his orbit, and then he works with them on a book, which is good for them. I mean, it's great work. It's great for everyone, right? They get a head start because they're standing on the shoulders of someone who's already got a very established name in the market. And probably for him, it's another piece of IP to have out there. So awesome. So he is really big in the leadership space, and he's a really big speaker. And I think that's definitely a position I can get to, because I'm a good public speaker now. I give talks, which really change people's mind. I gave a talk at a big manufacturing conference recently, and someone came up to me and said, "You totally changed my mind." About this subject. And I think if you have that kind of power as a speaker, I think it can take you a long way. And that's something I had to work on. And I know, and probably this is good. We were going to talk about podcasting at some point, and it's probably a good point to talk about that. Just briefly segue into that anyway. And podcasting was something I got into because it seemed like other people were doing podcasts. So I thought it was a good piece of content to do. And also I could learn from other people. And, I always liked the idea of it, and I always liked doing creative stuff and so on. And when I first started out, I wasn't a very strong orator,
Hmm.
and I didn't have good structure, and I couldn't control my voice very well, and there was lots of ums and ahs. Um, but through the process of podcasting, that improved. I learned to control my voice and tone, and that, I think, helped me improve and get to the point of being a good speaker,
Okay.
because that then wasn't a challenge. That was one of the challenges taken away, that you can go up on stage, you can stand there, you can orate, you know how to tell a story. If you've done podcasting, I think it's a good apprenticeship. And yeah, I think once you have that speaking superpower, I really can accelerate the opportunities, and that's what it's doing for me now. It's opening doors for me, because not everyone is on social media.
Yeah. Okay.
Not everyone's on LinkedIn. Not everyone's on Twitter. But people do go to conferences and summits. So, and a lot of these people don't go to, who aren't on social media, go to these summits. So it's a really good way of reaching these decision makers.
How do you get your gigs for that? Do you have an agent? Do you approach people? Do you actually directly message event organizers? I'm sure I think it's the classic thing of, again, there's a lot of people that want to get more into that and develop that side of their business. It was just out of interest, what's your technique for that?
So far, I have been just reaching out to people myself. I have started getting some inbound inquiries. I was actually asked earlier this year to do another keynote for a conference. That didn't actually work out. I don't know why, but that didn't work out. But the first thing is find ones. There will be ones where you can just go and talk at. Some people will want you to pay for.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not so sure about doing that. I mean, fair enough. People are entitled to ask you to pay, but there are free opportunities out there where you can go and practice. But once you start getting good, make sure you video yourself, because that's what I do, because then I can send people my last video and show them of how good I am, and I am very good. So, and that when people are going to book you, they want to know that you're very good, because they're putting you in front of it's their name as well that people are invested in.
Cool. So I am conscious of time. So likewise, I know how busy you are and that kind of thing as well. One of the things that we tend to cover in all of the kind of interviews, and it's actually one of my favorite bits, is all about any advice that you have for other people. And also linking that back is that you've really kind of shared your journeys we've gone through. So in the same way that you were hustling in Soho with TVs trying to get that first gig, in many ways you've still got that mentality and work ethic now trying to get speaking gigs. But again, it's the hustle of actually finding people out, approaching them. And I think the people that are resilient enough to keep trying to graft and work hard and do things and put themselves out there, it's more likely that the $1 million opportunities will come. That, for instance, the guy who I mentioned at the start, which is the Ryan Serhart guy, he said that he'd been rejected 1,000 times for all this different stuff, but he kept going, eventually got one, poof. And that's true with a lot of people. It's the resilience to, you mentioned, quite well about how it's easy to get knocked back and, things aren't going well and do you quit and then COVID hits and do you just give up and get a job or do you not? But actually, if you're willing to just keep going and that kind of thing, that's really kind of, valuable kind of knowledge to share. But relating to that then, would you be happy to share what's the best piece of advice you ever had?
I think, well, I'll share quickly two things. One is having a great role model, or having the seed planted by a great role model. And I think even though I spent a limited amount of time with Baz Luhrmann, being around someone who was inspirational, creative, empathetic, understanding, and patient as a leader showed me what a great leader could be like.
Okay.
And I think that was a very powerful thing. So I think if you can get yourself the experience of being next to a great leader, I think that could be a powerful thing. And something I read, which I think is just stays true all the time, is by Zig Ziglar, the great American motivator, who said garbage in equals garbage out. And I think we have to be careful about what we consume because it so powerfully influences how we think about the world and taints the color of the world that we
Hmm.
experience. So I think we have to be really intentional
No,
about that.
I agree. There's been loads of studies to do with even things like country music, which is historically traditionally sad or depressing, and how that can affect people's mood. And even watching the news now, most of news is shock, bad things, and it can make you think, oh my God, we live in the world's worst place. When actually, if you can just turn off various sources, life can magically seem so much better. Yes, exactly as you say, just based on who you kind of are around, the content you consume, that kind of thing. If you were to give advice to your younger self, so you could pick you bottom set at school, you trying to get that first gig when maybe things didn't work out, or even when COVID hit and the world got a lot tougher. If you were to give advice to your younger self, what would it be?
I think try and form strong relationships with more people.
Okay.
I think in times of crisis, if you've got strong relationships with more people, that can help carry you through because you can pick up the phone to those people and say, what have you got? Or even just get advice from those people. And this actually ties into one key idea that I talk about now with coaching is that ability to remain curious for longer. And so I think more relationships with more people will give you more perspectives, more support, and also help you remain curious for longer, which will lead to better solutions as well.
No, cool. Is there anything you would like to talk about and plug before we go?
No, I think if people are interested in becoming better leaders, then come to my website, interstellarway.life, sign up for my newsletter. My journey is still unfolding, and I would love you to be part of it.
Cool. Where can people find you on socials? Are you on Twitter, Instagram, any of the others?
Come and find me on
LinkedIn?
LinkedIn. Yeah, come and find me on LinkedIn. That's the best place. I think it's Bull Andrew or Andrew. If you look for Interstellar and Andrew Bull, you'll find me on LinkedIn.
Good stuff. Cool. Well, I appreciate your time today. I've really enjoyed it. And actually, I love to, it's part of the reason why I do this. I like to learn from different people, different backgrounds. So, for instance, I previously knew nothing about film and TV within reason. But it's also fascinating to see that actually the parallels between creative careers and so even like engineering, manufacturing, which is my kind of background, a lot of the challenges are the same. It's getting squeezed by suppliers, people screwing you over, getting made redundant, what you do next. And it's just, I bet the same is true in baking and name almost any career. I bet you're actually a lot of the same kind of stuff happens. So no, thank you for your time today. I do really appreciate it. Thank you for your time. Check out Andrew's book if you get a chance. And yeah, I guess keep in touch.
Thank you.
No worries. Cheers. Bye-bye.